How many boats have you handled in your entire life?
Hundreds.
Okay, and how many times have you crossed your wake around the loop?
7, working on my 8th.
What is the biggest drawback of pod drives?
Prop forward-facing exposed props.
And can anyone operate a boat regardless of their experience and age?
Trained, yes.
Welcome to the Full Displacement Podcast. Today, we're honored to have with us Captain Paul Bates from No Regrets Lifestyle. And if you followed Paul's channel, you already know quite a few things about running powerboats, trawlers, the Great Loop, all of these great topics. But I'm going to let Paul perhaps give us his introduction.
All right, real quick, my background, I started out in sailing, owned 2 sailboats. One of my favorite all-time boats I ever owned was a 25 Catalina swing keel, sailed that all up and down the West Coast. Loved that boat. And on Lake Mead. So then as I got older, I figured, hey, and as a young man, believe it or not, I picked up a trawler magazine, Nordhaven's on there, obviously. And I dreamed about doing like the Panama Canal. It was just like a boyhood dream. And I remember going through that. Anyway, long story short, COVID came, lost my corporate job. I was a trade show exhibits project manager, and I ran the rental department in there. And then also, I during COVID, I said, hey, I want to do something with my life. I had a little money saved up. I learned how to do all that. And then I went off into the trawler market. I had family down in Alabama. I was married at the time, and we went over there. We bought a trawler. And I didn't really pay attention to the Great Loop, but I was debating whether to go to the West Coast or the East Coast, since I lived on Vegas, is where I was born and raised. So we always boated down in California, and I pretty much had a boat down in California most of my adult life. Anyway, so then we came, and I had to make the decision, and I went for trawler. Then the reason that got me over here was I said, oh my gosh, I didn't even know about America's Great Loop. But then I said, what an opportunity for me to get my time for my captain's license. Because one thing that separates me from other people is I'm a slow learner. I was a single screw. My first trawler down in California was a single screw trawler. And I mastered that thing, So when I went to the twin screws, I was confused. My brain didn't work. It was like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? So I went and did the loop. I did it on 2 different boats. I bought my original boat, and then I had to tell my ex-wife we're buying another boat in the middle of the loop because I found such a great deal on it. And we also had a plan of living on it for 4 years. So we wanted a bigger boat. So that's how it kind of got started. I went ahead and completed the loop all on my dime. So it cost me about $150,000. A lot of people ask the question about this captain's license thing. I got the captain's license strictly to sign off on people's insurance. If I didn't need it, I wouldn't have it. And all it is a piece of paper saying you passed a test. It has nothing to do with out there learning how to drive boats or anything like that. So then we did the loop. I started delivering boats. But what really sets me apart from other training delivery captains, I can do single screw, twin screw, pod drives, all of it, because I've done all of it. But where I learned the most, because like anything else in life, experience is everything, and practice. If you want to be an Olympic star, a great athlete like Michael Jordan, you have to practice, right? So the only way to do that is to get a job in the industry doing that. So have either one of you heard of Little Palm Island?
Yes, down in
It's over in
the Keys.
Florida Keys.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I took a job. I took my boat to the Bahamas, my big 50-footer, took it over to the Bahamas. I did the loop in the Bahamas, came back, and I was talking to them. And about 1 in 10 applicants that try out for this job actually get the job, because it's pretty brutal. So even as a paper captain, I call them, or a YouTube paper captain, you wouldn't have the experience to even be able to pull the boat in there without doing what I did. Does that make sense? Like, you couldn't do it. So even I thought I knew how to drive a boat until I got there. Because like anything else, it doesn't take 100 dockings, which you guys got to break this down. America's Great Loop is 600 hours. It's 50-mile days. It's 60 dockings. Do you know what I'm saying? So how much experience
that's a good breakdown.
And so how much experience can you get with 60 dockings? You're still, the average boater takes his boat out once, maybe twice a year. So you still, even me, I was once a week when I was learning how to drive my boat originally. And I had skill, but I grown up in this industry my whole life. So I had a little bit of skill, but I didn't know anything until I really got that job over at Little Palm. And that's what gives you thousands of dockings, because we're doing 20 dockings a night. The first year I worked there, we were working 7 days a week. And so you do the math on that. It's over 1,000 dockings, 55 knot winds, sick ripping current in 5 different boats. We had a single screw and 3 twin screws, and only one of those boats had 1 thruster on it. So my boss used to joke around, and he's always yanking on the thruster, saying, "You're going to break that when we need it. We're not going to have it." He didn't care, because to use the thruster was, it's a sin basically. But
So, Paul, let's back up a little bit. When did you do the loop? What year was that?
that would have been COVID. So
Okay.
we were forced to do the Erie Canal. And so we had to get the boat under 15 feet. I just ran the Erie Canal 2 weeks ago, and that 15, that is the hard number. Like, I would never, if you can't get your boat to 15, you're not going to run the Erie Canal. So
Yeah.
the whole entire Erie Canal.
And I think what's really impressive in your experience, or what we're going to bring to the table today, is talking about the different propulsion type and the kind of boat that's right for you. Current Yachts, with the brokerage business, this is what we do, right? We help match the people to the kind of boat that they should have. And sometimes they kind of gloss over their propulsion or single versus twin. And so I really want to spend the time today to unpack this with you, because you have so much hands-on experience doing it yourself and showing others how to do it. Before we dig deeper into this episode, tell us about your philosophy, the no regrets lifestyle, and where that came from.
So I think boating is a lifestyle. It definitely is. And it doesn't matter whether you're a sailor or power boater. That's another debate for another day. But it really is it is a lifestyle choice. And the people that make that choice, it is hard. It's not easy, but it's very rewarding. I actually think it keeps people younger. The people that actually take the challenge and do it, they're rewarded by it. But it's a different kind of reward. It's not easy. And that's why when you see the American Great Loop numbers, they compare it to climbing Mount Everest, 2,000 climbers, 2,000 boaters. You actually have a better shot at climbing Mount Everest than you do. And there's a reason for that. And it's those type of people that really, they challenge themselves and get around the loop. It's a lifestyle. It's a choice. Do you know what I'm saying? So that's how I came up with that. My channel had several names before that. And so that was work in progress, if that makes sense. So then I finally settled on that, because it is a lifestyle choice.
Yeah, and I hear that all the time from people who are looking to buy the boat is, they've waited all their life and they're like, if I don't do it now, I'm not going to do it. And that no regrets is some of the reasons why people will just make the move to buy the boat now instead of later, or pushing it off. But one of the biggest questions I get is, what boat is easiest to drive? Which boat is easiest to dock? Yeah. All of these things. And, there's so many different boats out there with so many different types of hulls and propulsion systems and thrusters and this and that and dynamic positioning and joystick controls and IPS drives. People can get lost in all of this. And sometimes they don't even know. They just think, oh, it's got this little joystick thingy. It must be easy, right? And as you well know, with wind and current and depth and all these other things, there's a lot of factors that go into this. So can you define for us in plain language what the close-quartered controls for docking are, and the 3 moves that matter in a marina and close, tight spaces, like moving sideways, spinning in place, holding position against wind and current, things like that?
So here's how I explain it to all my clients. And before we get too far into this video, I want to say that if you follow this video all the way through, at the end, we're going to leave a code there, and I'm going to do some stuff for you guys. You can use the code, and then you can contact me, but that's going to be at the end of the video. We'll announce it. So very interesting question, because the first thing, and it depends on the propulsion of the boat. That is so important, because single engine, twin engine, there's guys that'll say that a single engine is as maneuverable and it costs the same to run twins, and it does really, but it does cost more money to run twin engines. So the first step on a twin engine boat is just having those two engines. And it doesn't matter if it's a pod drive or a non-pod drive. And I try and teach all of my students that to not use the pods and not use any thrusters or anything. I almost prefer that they buy the boat. That Grand Banks, you just saw that this is the front of it right here. We're going to Mackinac Island. I'm glad that it didn't have thrusters installed for two important reasons. But I want them to learn how to drive the boat without thrusters. It doesn't matter whether it's single screw or twin screw, because the better you are, I could tell you 100 stories about 100 different situations, even on America's Great Loop and stuff like that. But you really got to, when you're coming in, it's patience and be slow and get training. A lot of people, like if you get a driver's license in the United States, it takes 6 months to get that driver's license. If you want to fly an airplane, when I got my pilot's license, I think it was required 10 hours of solo flying time, but there's nothing saying, well, you could drive any boat you want and there's nobody out there saying you need to get trained. The good thing about it is all the big, expensive Nordhavens, Flemings, Sabres, now Grand Banks is into that market. They've dropped all their the less expensive boats now, and they're going to the big dollar boats. Anyway, they all you get lots of training before you ever get on that boat from the manufacturer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So this is more like the used market. Where do you go get that training? Because even a lot of those are sold through the dealership. They have good captains there that do a lot of different training and stuff like that. But for the guy that doesn't do, I think when you get me on a boat with you, it's the equivalent of owning that boat for about 1 year for every, let's say, couple days. So, and you can't get that. Do you know what I'm saying? Because I walk them through it, and I through the actual slipping of the boat. So when I get into a marina, the big thing is when you get into that marina, you don't know what the current's doing. You don't know what the wind's doing until you get in there. So you've got to make good judgments. I like see that flag on the front of that boat. I love having that there because that gives me that wind direction. And then I have to make decisions once I get into those close quarters. And they're not always the decision I think I'm going to make, because I'll let the boat, I'll have a feel for the boat. And if you want to drive with me and you want to get your hands slapped, grab the steering wheel on a twin screw boat. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, it doesn't do you any good. Why are you wasting time with steering that boat? But on a single screw, it matters very much. Yeah. So it's all making those choices and stuff like that. And it's all about your tools. Do you want to have a boat with good tools? Then you have to spend the money to buy the boat with good tools.
And someone once told me when I first started driving a boat and was scared, she said, well, never approach a dock faster than you want to hit it. That was the rule of thumb. Don't go faster than you want to hit something.
And I think that's to be said on, it doesn't matter sailing or powerboat. That is the problem on a single screw. You have to carry in momentum. If you don't,
I was going to say that's not necessarily true. I came to find out, because sometimes you need that foil over the rudder, especially in reverse, to be able to maneuver. Correct. And if you're going too slow, you get absolutely no ability to maneuver into the slip.
Correct.
So I would say maybe on the forward approach, that's correct. But on the reverse approach in a single screwed monohull, it's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Every docking's different. You could do that same docking 1,000 times, but it's different because you don't know the day, the current, and the wind. And so approaching the knowing your equipment, being trained for your equipment is probably the single best thing you can do to make good decisions when you're trying to slip your boat. If you're untrained, this is a perfect example. I had a guy, I consulted with him. He ended up buying the boat through a broker, blah, blah, blah. He did not do the training after he purchased the boat. So he decides he's going to take it out. He's from New York. He has a couple friends. They go on it. They jump in it. They put it in the water. $600,000 worth of damage. That's what they did in the marina. That's what that costs their insurance company. And, out of $500, my rate is $500 a day. If he'd have just spent that for 1 day, that would have never happened. And these insurance companies are getting harder and harder about all that stuff too, because they understand trained and untrained. So.
And one thing we're seeing as well, when people go to buy a bigger boat, that the insurance companies are requiring, in order for insurance to be valid, that for a certain
100%.
number of hours, it's maybe 20 or 50. I've seen as much as 50 hours for clients required to have a captain sign off that they were with them on the vessel during this time, and now they are proficient in the ability to drive their boat, which I think is great. The only people that can mandate this is insurance companies. So I'm glad that they're doing that now.
And I think it's also a trend that we're seeing more now than we did 10 years ago, where people were more reasonable in their upgrade of boats. And here we're finding first-time boaters, right? Sometimes, Paul, that will come to you and they just bought a 50-foot something and they're like, teach me. It's a lot. It's a lot. So evidently the insurance has to follow. And for that, there's going to be some requirements. So I'd like to move on perhaps to what are the most common setup as far as propulsion and aids to propulsion, and then we can go over some of the examples to kind of talk through the pros and cons and have Paul's perspective on those. I also would like to point out that we boaters love to use different words for the same thing. So when we say single screw, that's usually a single shaft drive, single engine. And I wanted to actually start with a shaft drive with twin engine. So in this case, Paul, what is perhaps the boat that matches that to a T that you've taught on a lot? What do you think works? What are the challenges? Tell us about the common twin engine setup for shaft drive.
Okay, so for a shaft drive, you got two different, even on a twin screw boat, you'll have naturally aspirated motors and you'll have turbocharged motors, higher horsepower motors. Both of them react a little bit different. The actual slipping, if you want to, putting your boat in with no thrusters, the higher horsepower engines are obviously work better. Because on the slower horsepower engines, like I want to just use Ford Lehman as an example, or, the Perkins or whatever, you just have less there's just less bite in the water, and you got to wait. You got to be patient and wait for the boat to come around. With the more horsepower boats you hit, they're usually the boats turning pretty quickly. So I would say you got to understand what you want, because an NA boat is a much cheaper to operate than a turbocharged boat by a considerable amount of money. So
give us examples of those types of boats, if you could.
Like a DeFever 44, that's the one I was talking with this morning. It's a great little boat. It runs either Ford Lehman's or it runs Perkins, and they're usually NA motors in them. And they offer, probably for 44 feet, it's the only walk-around engine room that you could get into in one of these boats. But the NA, there's tricks that you can do. And what I do is I usually add fuel. If I'm into a bad situation, I'll add fuel to the boat. John Deere's another really good propulsion system, but I'll add a little bit of fuel to them because you can take them up to, 1,000, 1,100 RPMs, and then you can start bumping on the NAs with that, and that'll help in wind and current to give you more horsepower, if that makes sense. Because you're pushing a big wheel on these trawlers, and they're meant to go long distances at a constant speed. So when you're putting them in the slip, they're as maneuverable, but there's a few little tricks to the NAs.
Okay, that makes sense.
So who is this type of propulsion best for, would you say, as far as the boater profile that you work with or that you come across? Who's this best for as far as experience and coachability and the type of people, the clients you've taught?
So there's some people that are just timed out. And so as we get older, our reaction time. So when you have twin sticks and single sticks, it's a different world. You can have these sticks on any propulsion system, because now in the modern day, I always tell everybody, modernize your yacht. And one of the things that I like is, being a yacht control, is I like to switch them to Glenn Demings and put a single stick on, because having the twin sticks is a little bit more complicated to teach somebody, but also you can get in trouble with the single sticks. So the first thing I teach is throttle control. That is absolutely the first thing anybody has to learn, because whenever you see in a marina, they'll start panic shifting. That's the first thing every freaking new boater does, is they'll start panic shifting and the boat is all over the place. You don't know how many times I'm like, "Wah!" just screaming, grabbing the kill switch. Like, oh my God, can't believe you just did that. So I'll take them out in open water. I let them play with the throttles, putting it into gear before they ever even get close to a marina. And then I hope that they react well when I get to that marina. But there's been two boaters that in particular that it was scary.
And so I would say for that particular setup, usually, and you've already told us that you don't want your clients, when they learn to rely on a bow or stern thruster, but that would be really overkill on this boat because you've already got the ability to pivot the boat and maneuver pretty well. Would you say that's just, not necessary, the thrusters at that point?
So like I said earlier, it's a tool. So if you can afford to add nice tools and put those in your toolbox, they're very nice to have. And believe it or not, the thrusters come in more handy after you've docked the boat or when you're doing that last little dial in into the marina. Does that make sense? Like, it doesn't matter whether you're pulling into the fuel dock or you're pulling into your slip.
Yeah, that's fair.
You're holding your lines over. So I always tell my clients, get the remote. My God, it's $500 option. And you can just put it on there. And so that when you jump off the boat, I try and teach, and I hate to say this, and it doesn't matter whether it's a man or a woman, I try and teach that person to single hand the boat into the slip. And it doesn't matter if it's a 70-foot boat or a 50-foot boat, because I want less stress on the wife. And I'm just using the wife, but it could be the man, because believe it or not, I have clients.
The spouse, right, Paul?
Yeah, the spouse. Let's use that terminology. Because even I'm going out to a boat in Jacksonville, which is I want to say it's a 65 Grand Alaskan. So very, $1 million plus boat. I think it was 1.2. And the husband was forced into you know what I'm saying? Like, it was the woman all the way. Like, she said, I'm leaving you if you don't buy me this boat, and we're going to go cruising. So there are lots of women. And probably 7 boats ago, the beginning of the year, I had some clients that was single screw, and he couldn't dock the boat. So we switched. The wife does the docking, and he handles the lines. The handling lines is harder, I think, than docking the boat. But she did better at docking the boat. So we put her at the helm, and we put him doing the lines, and it works for them. I just got a phone call from the other day. They're happy. They're running up and down the coast, getting ready to head to the Keys. So but they got training. So
yeah. Understood. And so continuing on the shaft, and then Amanda will talk to us about pod propulsion next. If you are a buyer and you're considering single versus twin engine for a shaft boat, Paul, how do you help them decide before they make the decision what is right for them? Perhaps by size or budget, would you say, or durability concerns? What do you say to them to help them decide?
There's guys that'll say, like I said earlier in the podcast, that a single or a twin but I don't rule it out. So I don't want you to go into this, especially in that budget market. Like, you cannot rule out a single screw, or you can't rule out twin screws. You can't do it because you don't know what the opportunities are going to come up. And so if you say, no, I'm not going to operate, the big question is, do I operate the single screw? Can they be as maneuverable as a twin screw? No, because you need points of thrust. And on a twin screw, you can have 4 points of thrust. On a single screw, you can only have 3 points of thrust. So the more points of thrust you have, the easier the boat is to maneuver. But a single screw with twin thrusters, a lot of main ship, it will come with a single thruster or a twin thruster. It's the number one boat on the loop, and there's a reason for that because of that built-in staircase getting up to the helm. But a lot of, they do make that in a twin screw, twin thrustered boat too, which is very, very maneuverable. Later on in the podcast, I'm going to tell you which boat is the actual most maneuverable boat in the entire world. And you're not going to believe it. You'll think
you're not going to tell us now. You're saying we have to wait.
You have to wait.
We'll come back to that.
Well, that brings us to the next point, which a lot of boats today have IPS pod drives. And I can say I have heard so many times people saying, no pod drives. If the boat has pod drives, I don't want it. So then I've also heard, and I've driven myself, pod drives. And, I think it's more so the ease and ability of them are very simple, in my opinion. But it could be the maintenance and the cost if you actually do hit the bottom with pod drives.
I have a feeling Paul does not love pod drives from his face. I don't know.
Okay. So tell us about how pod drives work.
I love pod drives, by the way. Okay. But again, let's look at it in our toolbox. So those are good tools. Does that make sense? But they're tools for people that can afford those tools. So if you can't afford those tools, you got to take them off the list. And then there's better pod drives. The IPS, Volvo, if you buy IPS, you're buying Volvo engine. There is no such thing as a bad diesel motor. They need fuel, air, and keep them cool, and they're going to run for you. So now you got to go to the drive system, and we have shafts and pods, and there are better pods than, and you know what I'm saying? Like, I think both pod systems, which is Zeus and IPS, I think they both perform fairly close, but the Volvo will be a little bit better. They at slow speed, you can really just kind of just take it. Again, it's teaching people throttle control, because you get in there with a pod and you start jacking that pod around, you'll be surprised. You can cause a lot of damage with the pod drive real fast. So, Amanda, you've driven one or you have not?
Absolutely, I have. Yeah.
And did you use IPS or have you done Zeus or
No,
both?
only
Or?
the IPS. I have not driven Zeus drives, but IPS many
Real
times.
close, like you would have no problem making the transitions. There really is no difference. The dynamic positioning, all of it's pretty much the same. And the handle of the pod, it's very minute. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So as far as the actual, if they're working correctly, maintained correctly, both systems work very well.
Yeah.
Can you explain, Paul, actually, the difference in the technology where on the Volvo pod, the propeller is facing forward, right? Versus Cummins, they're not, they're facing aft. Can you explain that and how that came about? And is the fuel efficiency in your mind, is that proven in real life?
So think of it as a front wheel drive car. So when you're being pulled across the water and you do get better efficiency. So that's why Volvo did it. But is it good for the keys? Is it good for, like if you pick up a fishing line, if you pick up a crab pot line, if you pick something up in one of those Volvo IPS drives, which happens in the loop. I've talked to so many guys and they'll hit a log inside of there's nothing you can do about it because you can't see it. So having those front drives, it's one of the negatives about IPS. If I had to put a negative on IPS, if I'm buying pods, I'm buying IPS and taking my chances with that, but be prepared to take it out and have the maintenance done if you hit something, because you can't. I have one particular boat out there. I hate to pick on boats, but this is a Burger. It was over a $7 million yacht build, and it has pods on it. These guys travel. He's probably got 100,000 miles under his belt. All he does is they live on this thing full time. They never go to marinas, blah, blah, blah. And he's hit. You know what I'm saying? I have another guy who has a 65 Viking. I'm supposed to be out there in a couple of weeks. Same thing, going through the locks in the Erie Canal, he hit a log. So those forward-facing pods that's the negative about IPS, whereas the Zeus are rear-facing, so you're actually pushing. So the IPS are going to be a little bit more efficient, and when I say that, it's probably 5% or something like that, but the best fuel mileage and best performing are the IPS, but you've got to deal with that front-facing pod. So it is a negative.
Yeah. Yeah. And
it's good and
bad. And you got to weigh those things. And the question is, we all know this as boaters. The question is, have you ever touched bottom? There's the ones that have, and then the liars. So.
Correct. It's the same thing with motorcycle drivers. The guys that are going down and the guys that have been down, same thing.
Yeah.
I've been boating a long time in the Keys and everywhere, and they'll ask me, where's the best place? But you got a chance to run aground anywhere you go. And it happens to all of us, every single boater. You're going to run aground. It's just hopefully you know what to do. You've been trained and you know how to get out of it very quickly.
And just out of curiosity, regardless of the type of propulsion, how long do you find that most of your clients hire you for, Paul? It's a question we do get from folks, not the insurance required bit, but I'm new to this boat. Help me fully understand how to maneuver this boat with confidence. How long does that require?
Great question. Age is a big factor because I know that the younger guys will pick it up much, much faster. Those guys, they usually pick it up pretty quickly and they're on it. But even, let's just say I have a 37-year-old on a 60-foot Prestige down in the Keys, did some training with him, but he calls me back because even though I signed off for the insurance, he's still not comfortable with the boat. I do a trip with the family. Do you know what I'm saying? To make sure everything goes right for them and it's still the right thing to do, if that makes sense. So I would say 2 days, you could probably, I tell everybody, slipping your boat's not going to be the issue. It's going to be more after you've purchased the boat, like running aground because you didn't know how to follow the chart. You know how to use your radar, your autopilot and stuff like that. Anchor, it's learning the other system. That's what's going to kill you more than the actual docking the boat after about 2 to 3 days of training.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And since we're here, one other question that I think about is how do you make sure that you're the right fit for the couple or the single solo handler who wants to have lessons from you? How do you do this little interview process to ensure there's a mutual fit?
Well, you guys know that I've been running the YouTube channel. So pretty much everybody boat that I get on, they already know me personally. And so they already get a sense of who I am. I'm not an easy captain, I'll tell you that. I'm not going to baby you and I'm not going to Like if you're making a mistake, I'm going to let you know it's a mistake very quickly. You know what I'm saying? And don't do that again. So if you get your feelings, if you get your feelings hurt easily, I'm probably not your captain for you. But if you want to learn to drive your boat and do it proficiently and maximize your time, I'm your captain. You know what I'm saying? But if you want to play games and hold and hug, I'm not your captain. No, so I usually will interview them for about an hour. But then there's also trips that I go on, and, it's kumbaya. They're never going to drive the boat. And so then I'm just the dedicated captain, if that makes sense. So, and they know their limitations because I've had people, I've walked on their boat and I said, you know what, you got to sell your boat because you're never going to drive it. And it happens. It's happened 3 or 4 times over the years. But that same guy, I take him out and he hires me for the day. We take his family. He has the greatest trip of his life, but he's never going to get the boat back in the slip no matter what I do, and usually that's age. It's timed out. Like they don't have the experience. An experienced 70-year-old will do great at the boat too. And it doesn't really matter what his experience is, but he has to have been on the water with either a single screw, some type of, understanding the winds, the currents, what the boat's going to do, pontoon boat. I don't care. They usually do better than the 70-year-old that's never owned a boat in his entire life. Those guys, they need as many tools as they can have.
It comes down to expectations too in the beginning. A lot of people will buy a boat with the expectation that they're never going to drive it, that they're always going to hire a captain so that they can just relax and not have the stress of any of that. And when you do the math of how many times people actually do use their boat, it's cheaper to hire a captain and take the stress away from themselves. So there are those types of boaters.
I'm waiting for the couple that actually wants to do the loop. They've timed out mentally, like they're not going to operate the boat, but just want to do the loop and then pay the captain, because that is, I think it's a thing. You know what I'm saying? It probably happens more than we think, but also that takes the stress out. Like I know the marinas, the fuel. So a lot of times I'll get hired from people just for the expertise of knowing the ins and outs and the fastest way to get there, especially the big corporate executives. That would happen to be this last one on his Grand Banks. He has a big important job and his time is limited. So we're doing a very long run in a very short amount of time. So making good decisions to get across Erie, Huron, Michigan, whether we run at night, whether we run during the day, all these things. He's pretty proficient at the boat. By the second or third day, he doesn't need me, but he keeps me there. So this last trip was 14 days. The knowledge that guy had, we actually broke down. I had to single screw the boat in twice in 20 knot winds. So he got to see and experience all that. He got to see me do it. We ran out. He hit a valve off on the fuel. I don't know why. The boat's been running fine for a week now. I didn't even think to run down there and check to see, because we had a weather delay and we were messing with a toilet project right next to the valves. He accidentally hit one of the valves closed. So I get out there on the beginning, and we knew that it was going to be windy, 20 knot winds, and I lose the starboard end. Well, I feel it coming down. I'm going, oh my God, this is horrible. And it's pitch black. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. So seeing those and experiencing those, and then seeing how, I never panic, because if you see me panic on a boat, it's time to panic, and I don't panic. You know what I'm saying? Like I've almost sunk a boat out in the Gulf Stream, and I've had some close calls.
So what we want to know now, Paul, is what do you think is the most maneuverable boat? That doesn't mean it's the perfect boat for everybody, but do tell us, do you have like a top 3 or just a glorious winner, and why?
So I'm not going to go with particular brand because it doesn't really matter. The propulsion system is what matters.
Right.
And I'm going to go twin stick, twin thrustered, because you can add a yacht controller to it. You know what I'm saying? And then you can use the joystick with that. But it eliminates that slosh from the pods. So I think it is. Green Line is a great example. I don't know if I even mentioned this, but I'm like the training captain for Green Line Yachts. That's the hybrid electric propulsion engines. Super cool boats. I just took a 58-footer all the way from Florida all the way to Annapolis. It was super cool.
We just sold one to some clients last month.
The technology's there. Those guys have been around the longest, and the boat is a good, solid build. So I've been on 3 or 4 of them now, and it's just a good, solid build. They did a good job with the build. Like I like the way it's all laminated, the hulls, the ride itself, because they redesigned the hull to do that slow propulsion, and it really is a nice boat. Even though I don't talk about brands, but that boat comes standard with twin sticks and twin thrusters.
Interesting.
And that's the perfect segue into perhaps a teaser. We want to have Paul back to talk about hybrid propulsion systems, including Greenline, but there are others out there. So looking forward to that conversation with Paul.
Yeah, because a lot of boaters, especially on the dinghy, I'll say, get the electric motor one because I like that. So yes.
All right.
So that then brings us to the maneuverability, the whole decision. What about the displacement mindset when it comes to the boats? Is it semi-displacement, full displacement? Hey, hence our name. What do you choose for the type of maneuverability and hull type?
So you got to remember too, because on a full displacement hull, your props are pretty much protected from your keel. So that's a great advantage that you need to look for. Those are usually your lower horsepower boats, your NA boats, and your props and your rudders are protected from that keel. They're still exposed out there, but they're protected. Like if you're going to run aground, you're more likely you're going to hit your keel. You're not going to do any prop or rudder damage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I would say those boats, but you're not going to get up on plane. My personal boat, my next boat, if I was going to buy a boat right now and I made this decision, would be somewhere around the Greenline or the Fleming is my choice. It's got a low profile, but it's a semi-displacement, and that one, your props and shafts are exposed, so you got to be much carefuler. No, I don't think they offer pods on the Fleming. They do straight shafts and rudders. But also another segment that we could touch on, since I've done so much with just hundreds of different boats, hundreds of different manufacturers, and probably somewhere around 80,000 nautical miles of actual miles of running these boats, is stabilization. Because another thing about the system that changes so fast as our industry changes, like I can take a 0-speed wings. They're much better than the stabilizers, but nobody would know that. Everybody has, because of these marketing, all these boats are marketed different and all these different systems are marketed different. But the 0-speed wings are probably better than the gyros. So anyway, that's a different subject for a different day.
Well, the debate is open. We're actually scheduled to have a Seakeeper on the podcast soon, so stay tuned for that. And then we'll hear Paul's counter take on it. Very exciting. I'd like to wrap up with Amanda's takeaways then from the conversation we had today. Can you give us the quick checklist for those boat buyers that are looking at a pre-owned boat and have to review, obviously, the running gear? What are some of the thoughts that you got from your experience and from Paul's conversation today?
So we have created a checklist that helps our buyers decide between the different types of drives and displacement hulls. And that's what we're doing, is helping the client find what's best for them and their use of the vessel. So on pod drives, we have to ask for service history, if they've had any groundings.
Correct.
Those types of things. Dealer support. A lot of the times people are hearing about Zeus not being able to be supported and serviced. So that's a big thing to watch out for. Then when you have your shaft drives, a lot easier as far as maintenance goes as well. So some people will switch to that. Then of course the surveyor will have to be looking at the cutlass bearings, the shaft alignment, those types of things. Then you have the propeller condition, right? Which makes a huge impact on performance. We just sold a boat that had the Shero props, and it was making such a huge difference in the ability for them to have propulsion through the water and their fuel economy. Just the addition of a very expensive prop, but it made that much difference in the long-term use of his boat with his fuel economy. So you've got to match the systems to the way you're
Correct.
actually going to use the boat and for what purpose. I'm sure you've seen that, and
100%.
we've spoken about that here. So that's exactly the type of matchmaking that we're doing, so that we're not saying, no, don't go for pod drives. They're the devil. Okay. A lot of people will say that. We're not saying that. We're saying make sure you understand the risks. Yeah, the risks of the ability of having nothing there to protect you, those props. And I mean, listen, I'm a sailboater. I'm going to hit the keel the first time. And that is it calms my mind, right? That I'm not going to be screwing up the very expensive pod drive if I touch the bottom. So I'm sure you understand that too.
100%. So, and again, I'm not against pods or for pods, but they're very maneuverable. They're much more fuel efficient. They run up on top very, very nicely. And like I said, they both have their advantages and their disadvantages.
Yep.
But I still think you need to learn how to drive a boat. The people that do better with the pods, they already know how to drive the boat, steer the boat, how the single, because you can lock your pods and then just use your shifters. But that to me, when you're talking to the client, it's tools. So can you afford those tools? And if you're going to put those tools in your toolbox, they're great to have if you can have them.
And Paul, for our audience listening that may be considering your services, the sweet spot of your services as a captain and training captain, not just deliveries, but also onboard training, is what size boats?
I'm between, let's say 35 and probably 80 feet is my sweet spot. So I just finished up a 70-foot Hatteras. We took that from Washington to Alaska. I was on that boat from Nassau, Bahamas. I took it all the way. I project managed that boat. I delivered that boat. And then I did yacht training. The yacht training was this year, was from Washington to Alaska, 1,000-mile run. But I also do like the green lines, like a single screw green line or the twin screw. We just sold a 50-foot twin screw green line, and we took it from Florida all the way. And I was included with the purchase price of the boat. So if you buy a boat through Greenline, that'll include my services already. It doesn't. You don't have to. I guess you would get a choice, but they would choose me as their preferred captain.
Paul, I know you offer both captain services for deliveries and for training. What's the difference between the two, actually?
Okay, so a true delivery company will carry the insurance binder on the boat. So if they're delivering a boat, that's why owner's not allowed aboard on them. They have one mate and they have a captain. It costs it's extreme amount of money. If you want to price it out, it's 5 times what I charge, if that makes sense. So the daily rate on that's about $1,700 a day. So it's 3 times. But they're getting an insurance binder to cover your $1 million boat. You're not allowed on it, and you're not allowed to drive the boat because only the captain can drive it for insurance reasons. So you're as a delivery, if you go with a true delivery company, they can't touch the boat. I come on your boat, I have to sign off a waiver from your insurance company seeing my 100-ton license, and that's the difference. So that's why I could get away with charging $500 compared to those guys that are about $1,700 a day. I want to hear in the comments because it's a true statement. You know what I'm saying? So when you see that as a training captain, you're allowed on board because it's your insurance. So, and the first thing the insurance company says, have you had any accidents? Have you done anything? I always joke with everybody because at the Little Palm job, you're out there. I was out there in hurricane, we didn't want that draw, but there was one hurricane and, 55 knot winds. Current is just absolutely sick, and we're having to dock the boat. And there's like 5 instances out there where I can remember, like, this is insanity. Like, you're using all of your power in the boat just to get it to get into this little spot. And in one mistake, you're going to wreck that boat. So have I hit anything? I hit everything out there. There's nothing, because when you have that kind of time and that many hours, you're going to hit stuff. Do you know what I'm saying? So have I hit the dock every time perfect? In my training experience, I have not. I'm not perfect. You cannot judge every situation, but have I ever done any insurable damage to a boat? No, I have not. I've not had one insurance claim with them. We repaired our own boats at Little Palm. We had to.
And if you are looking to hire a training captain, we will put the contact info in the description below for Paul, and the No Regrets Lifestyle links as well to his YouTube channel, so you can learn more and connect with Paul to hire him potentially.
So, Paul, for all of our listeners, you have something special that you want to offer our listeners here, right? Can you tell us that?
Yeah. So anybody that listens to this podcast and you listen all the way through, I want to do a 20% discount on my labor. And we'll have a code. You'll put it in the description. And then, so if you watch the pod, and we'll go with 1, 2, 3, 4. So you got to just tell me that. It's super simple, super easy. If you've watched it, 20% on my labor. It doesn't count. Like if I got to get on a plane and buy a plane ticket, I can't give you a 20% discount because I usually just charge whatever it costs me, because it's usually my time plus expenses is what it is. So not on the expense side. And then on my consulting side, I can do project management, the wings, the stabilization, the controllers and stuff like that. So when they're looking to remodel their yacht or something like that, or they're going to do something particular with the yacht, I can jump in there and I give them a little bit of consulting. I will do a same thing, 20% discount on that. And the first hour is free. So just remember that.
That's a great deal.
That's a very nice deal. Thank you for that.
So we're looking forward to chatting about hybrid propulsion next and more. So continue watching Full Displacement. We will see you on the next one. Thank you, Captain Paul. And we'll see you also on your channel. Fair winds.
Fair winds.
All right. Fair winds. God bless. Peace out. And thank you guys. Remember, live life with no regret. I do. And I love each and every one of you. And thank you guys for what you're doing on here, because it's truly, we need this in the industry. You're just educating and I love it.
Thanks so much, Paul.
Thank you.